All right, here's your homework. Right triangle trigonometry day 1. You can write this down on notebook paper. It doesn't have to be on this sheet. And remember, you can always pause the video to copy something down. This says write each trigonometric ratio, those words just mean sine, cosine, tangent, as a fraction and as a decimal, rounded to the nearest hundredth. Okay? Notice that I have all the sides. I do not have any angles. I am not going to press the sine button or the cosine button or the tangent button on my calculator. I'm just setting up fractions, and then I'm changing those fractions to decimals. Okay, so sine of k. Here's k. The sine of k is going to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. So I have to figure out which one is which. In this particular case, if we're looking at things from k, 17 is the hypotenuse. Really, it's the hypotenuse no matter what. The adjacent then is 8. That's an 8. And you said, by the way, the 17 is the hypotenuse. 8 is the adjacent. And the 15 is the opposite. So if I want the sine of k, that's opposite, which is 15, over hypotenuse. So that's 15 over 7. And then all we're doing to change it to a decimal is, in my calculator, either going 15, divided by 17. Did I say 7 before? 17. Or you could do 15, let's see. 15 over 17, and then change it to a decimal. You get 0.88 either way. Sorry, I didn't show you. You can either put it in a fraction or scrolling up as division. 15 divided by 17. So either way, you get 0.88, and that's my answer. So cosine of h, let's not do h yet. Let's do k down here because we were just looking at things from the perspective of k. Remember, from k, this is the adjacent, this is the opposite. Number 3 asks for cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the adjacent is 8, the hypotenuse is 17. So 8 over 17 is approximately 8 divided by 7. Oops. Let me clear everything out. I don't know what I've done. There we go. 8 divided by 17. I get 0.4705. So 0.47 is just 0.47. Okay? If you have not already tried these other ones, let's look at cosine of h. See if you can figure that out. And tangent of h. Pause it now. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and do it. Cosine of h. This is the adjacent to h. It's right next to h. This is the opposite for h. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so it's 15 over 17. 15 over 17, I don't have to put in my calculator because I just did it over here. 15 over 17 is still 0.88. Notice that the sine of k is equal to the cosine of h. That's because the opposite here, which opposite is for sine, becomes the adjacent when we move to the other angle, and adjacent is for cosine. Okay, tangent is opposite over adjacent. This is the adjacent, 15, so 8 is the opposite. So tan of 8 is 8 over 15. Tan of h, 8 divided by 15, and that's 0.53 repeating. Let me point out that because sine and cosine are both something over hypotenuse, and the hypotenuse is always the biggest side of a right triangle, the sine and the cosine are always going to have the biggest number in the denominator, so they're always numbers less than 1. If you make a fraction and the denominator is bigger than the numerator, that means it's a number less than 1, like 4/5 or 1/2. Okay? Tangent's not like that, though. There's no telling which leg is going to be bigger. Sometimes one leg's going to be bigger, sometimes the other one's going to be bigger. So tangent can be a number bigger than 1. This time it's not. But cosine and sine should always be numbers between 0 and 1. Tangent can be. Tangent can be 5. Tangent can be 4.3. or it can be a number smaller than 1. All right, remember that this says, this is nice of our book to say, use your calculator. You aren't always going to be told that, but if you know the degrees, all you have to do is go to your calculator. If you know the degrees of the angle, sine of 42 means punch in sine 42, enter. This is just the plain sine, not like any -1, anything fancy like that. Just the button that says SIN. So 0.669, that means I round up the second 6 to a 7. So 0.67 is to the nearest hundredth. Go ahead and do the rest of these if you have not already. Cosine of 89, tan of 55, sine of 6 degrees. And I would say you could pause. Yeah, you can pause. But I'm just going to go ahead and do them real quick. Cosine of 89 is about 0.02. It's 0.17. Tan of 55 is 1.43. And sine of 6 is about 10. Okay, so those are just a matter of typing in your calculator. A big part of this is knowing what you're supposed to do when. So up here, remember, we had all the sides. We make fractions. We have all the sides. We make fractions. And if they really want me to, I'll change it to a decimal. But I don't punch the sine button, the tangent button, or the cosine button. Down here, use my calculator, and I know the angles. Notice we didn't know any angles up here. If you have angles, which means degrees, that's when you use your calculator. All right, next. Let's find some missing side lengths. Find each length round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, you might want to go ahead and pause and try number 13. All right, now you've hopefully tried this. If I'm being asked to find DE, this is X. So that means from angle 20, the angle that's 27 degrees here, I'm working with the hypotenuse and I'm working with the opposite side. This would be the adjacent side, and I don't need it. Okay, so if I'm working with opposite and hypotenuse, the trig function that has opposite and hypotenuse in it is the sine. So I set up my equation, always set up an equation every single time. Sine of my angle, if I know the angle, I fill it in, equals opposite, which is 18, over hypotenuse, which is x. Now I'm going to put that over 1 so that I have a proportion. Solve my proportion, x times sine of 27. Remember, we cross multiply to solve proportions, equals 18 times 1. Is x alone? No. Notice I have not touched my calculator yet. I will wait until I have solved this to get x alone before I touch my calculator. Now I'm going to put this in my calculator. When x is alone, that tells you what to type in the calculator. 18 divided by sine of 27. 39.65. Okay, so the length of DE is 39.65, and that's my answer. 14. You might want to pause your screen and try number 14 now. Okay, now it's my turn. FH is what we're being asked for, so here's the x. If I'm working from this angle, here's hypotenuse, I don't really need it. Here's adjacent, and x is the opposite. So I'm working with the adjacent and the opposite. Which function uses, and when I say function, I'm just talking about the trig ratios. Which one of those uses opposite and adjacent? Tan. Tan of 31 equals opposite, which is x, over adjacent, which is 10. Put this over 1, and now I'm going to cross multiply. 10 times tan 31 equals x times 1. Is x alone? Yes, it is. So this time I'm already ready to put it in my calculator. 10 times tan 31. It doesn't matter if you do it in the opposite order. Tan 31 times 10. Just be careful. If you do tan 31 times 10, don't forget to close your parentheses before you press times 10. Close the parentheses times 10. You get the same thing. 6.008. 008 rounds up to 01. So x equals, or FH, equals 6.01. All right, next. Number 15. I'm looking for JK. Go ahead and copy down the triangle. Try it yourself. Pause the video. Now it's my turn. Okay, here's the angle I have. This side is the hypotenuse. JK is down here, and that's the adjacent. So I'm using adjacent and hypotenuse, which is the cosine. So cosine of 18 equals adjacent over hypotenuse. There's my equation. Now I'm going to put this over 1 and cross multiply. Cosine of 18 times 34.6. Don't just do 18 times 34.6. Cosine of 18 goes all together. So cosine of 18 0.95 times, actually it doesn't even matter what that is. I'm going to multiply it times something, times 34.6. 32.91. 32.91. Notice that the time I used my calculator was when x was alone on one side. All right, and the last one of these, here's your problem. This is 22.5 US, and the points are STU, and this is, it's kind of hard to read. I'm going to say that's 66 degrees. So go ahead and pause if you want to try it yourself. Okay, now it's my turn. U is the angle I'm looking at things from. So here's my hypotenuse, here's my adjacent, and this is the opposite. And the one we're looking for is SU, so that's the hypotenuse. So if I want the hypotenuse and I have the adjacent and hypotenuse are cosine. So cosine of 66 degrees equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Now I get to cross multiply. X times cosine 66 equals 22.5. X is still not alone, so I'm trying to get it alone. Let the equation tell you when it's done. If x is not alone, you are not done. Now the equation is saying this is what x equals, so I go to my calculator. 22.5 divided by cosine 66. It really doesn't matter if I close these parentheses because nothing's coming after it. 55.32. So US is approximately 55.32. All right? Now, if you can do this, you're doing really well. But I want